Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and this video is probably going to be a little longer than my normal ones, but I have a couple of different things I need to set straight based off of a cybersecurity presentation I saw yesterday. Now, I know some of you were probably in that audience with me, and I wanted to correct some of the advice I think that was given on stage that was incorrect. And obviously I'm not naming names or conferences or anything like that, but I think it's important to set this straight. So a couple of different things. Before we go into the actual advice that was given in my rebuttal, we need to set a baseline and understanding of what cybersecurity is. Now, a few months ago, or a couple months ago, I wrote an article for Forbes called The 5 Laws of Cybersecurity. And the first law of cybersecurity is if there's a vulnerability, it will be exploited. And the second law of cybersecurity is everything is vulnerable in some way. Now, with this foundation and with this understanding, if we're looking at operating systems like Windows or Mac, Android or iPhone, iOS, all that kind of stuff, we know that everything is vulnerable in some way. We may not have discovered it, or somebody has discovered it and we just don't know it yet, but everything is vulnerable in some way. And on that backdrop, the first piece of advice I'd like to address is what this cybersecurity person said. So he was asked, which is more vulnerable, Mac or PC? And he said, well, I can't really recommend one because both have vulnerability, and so both need good defense. I completely agree with this. But when asked the question, Android versus iPhone, he basically said, well, he picks iPhone over Android because it's, the zero-day exploits are significantly more expensive, and it's basically like a better system. And I disagree with that for a couple of different reasons. So if we know that everything is vulnerable, we want every tool in the arsenal to be able to defend whatever platform that we're sitting on, Android, iPhone, Windows, whatever it is. And in 2015, Apple removed all the virus scanners from the App Store, saying that the new Apple OS, iOS, was so secure that virus scanners weren't needed. Now, that was one part of their marketing piece, but the reason why they did that was they created a new sandboxing system that goes into the iOS so that the applications can't necessarily talk to the core of the operating system. I'm using very generic terms here. And so they didn't want a virus scanner that would be able to hook itself into the core like a virus scanner does for elevated access. The problem, though, that we have with this is that we now have nothing directly sitting on the device that allows us to retroactively scan if a threat is able to get through. And we know that threats have gotten through Apple's sandboxing system before and their filter system for app publishing. So in 2015, I think it was called Xghost Shell or Xghost Code. Chinese developers got a whole bunch of infected apps through the App Store, and obviously Apple corrected that situation. In 2017, WikiLeaks reported on the CIA's development of being able to actually just bypass the entire sandboxing system in iOS. Now, Apple obviously patched that, but this underscores that point. Now, on the Android side, Android is more of an open source platform. Anybody can develop for Android, and so it does have a higher susceptibility, but we have every tool in the arsenal with which to defend Android. I've got virus scanners and more advanced firewalls and DNS filters like I can get on iOS as well, but there is nothing that if something is able to bypass the defenses on an Apple where I can just flip open a virus scanner, make sure it's up to date, and then run that scan, and that's a serious problem. And when you're marrying this with the education and awareness of the user, which is something that he talked about on stage, and I completely agree with, if we've got a very aware, very educated user that is wrapped in security and the actual device itself has the ability to properly defend itself and check itself for changes, not to mention significantly more granular security permissions on the Android side, to me, Android is absolutely the right choice to go with because I have every tool in the arsenal knowing that if there's a vulnerability, it will be exploited and everything is vulnerable in some way. So that's a serious issue. The second one that he was talking about is with digital signage. Now, he likes digital signing, as do I, and I believe, in all of these tools. But the way he made it sound was that digital signing, well, it's verified by the publisher, therefore we know it's good. One, malicious things have gotten through the digital signing process as well, and malicious things have been digitally signed into both Apple and and Android. Different rates, but nevertheless, it happens. Also, the NSA proved that they are able to spoof digital signing. The first major example of that I can think of is Stuxnet in the mid-2000s, where they were able to actually sneak viruses into a stolen Iranian nuclear SCADA system. So we know that these things go on, again, with that premise that everything is vulnerable in some way and it will be exploited. So digital signing, it's important to understand, it is not the be-all, end-all, and we need other tools. We always need to layer security. And he talks about layering security, but he was not on stage developing that mindset of zero trust, meaning as a cybersecurity personnel, I have to walk in thinking everything is vulnerable in some way. It will be exploited. And so how am I mitigating that to the nth degree? So I am all for digital signage, but I'd also want virus scanners. I'd also want VPNs. I'd also want all of this other stuff. And the third thing that I really took umbrage with, and I know some of the people that I talked to after this presentation were like, oh my God, was the fact that he had said, basically, if you're going to use public Wi-Fi, use a VPN to protect yourself. And while I love VPNs and I'm all for VPNs, the problem with this is public Wi-Fi. Now, he literally got up there and did essentially the equivalent of an evil twin attack as a hacking demonstration. This is also a hacking demonstration that I do for audiences. And you don't know with public Wi-Fi if you're on legit or if you're on illegitimate Wi-Fi that is spoofing it or creating a different kind of access point or anything like that. And so it is so cheap to buy extra bandwidth or extra data from like a Verizon or a Sprint or whoever, that just stay off public Wi-Fi in general. You typically do not need to use it. And a VPN is not the be-all, end-all of security if for some reason you end up on public wireless. A VPN is not also a firewall. And so while a VPN will encrypt your traffic while you're moving from one place to the other, if I am sitting on the infrastructure of somebody that is malicious, that owns that infrastructure, they can probe and attack my device. And if they're able to get an infection into my device, then it's sitting behind the VPN and can possibly capture things. Or even if I'm sitting on legitimate public Wi-Fi, I now have the ability, or the hacker rather, is sitting on the same infrastructure, can browse the network, see all the devices, possibly attack and inject, depending on how the public Wi-Fi is set up. Public Wi-Fi in general is unsafe. And if we are approaching this from a zero trust standpoint, which all cybersecurity personnel should be approaching, just even saying that there is some acceptable limit to using public Wi-Fi is a serious problem. And a lot of people don't know this. And so I think some cybersecurity people may say, well, I'm never going to be able to get everybody off public Wi-Fi, so let me show you how to defend them. That's fine, but then tell them every tool in the arsenal. Tell them about more advanced firewalls. Tell them about antivirus scanners. Tell them about VPN. You give every tool in the arsenal to protect that device. But at the end of the day, and what I say in my speeches is you should never, ever, ever use it. I mean, gun to your head if you have to use it. Now you're fully defended, but just don't use it. And so those were a few things that I really took exception to in that, because I don't feel like that was conveyed, that cybersecurity is one of those few things I think in life that is essentially a zero-sum game. Now, we need to look at this as black and white. And if you are 80% defended, that's a 20% hole that you have. And so why are you 80% defended? Why are you making choices that increase that risk? Or why are you using a device that doesn't give you that extra 20% or extra 15% or extra 2%, whatever that is? That's the difference. And that's a serious flaw in thinking and logic for cybersecurity personnel if they don't have that zero trust mentality. We cannot trust technologically anything. We cannot trust our users to figure it out by themselves. So they need education and awareness. And he talked a little bit about that, but he did not drive that point home. And with some of his advice, that zero trust mentality was simply not there. And that was my issue with this. Other than that, it was a fascinating talk, and I would, definitely go see him again, but I just want to put my 2 cents in as a cybersecurity expert and as somebody in his field. Obviously, not as big, but here I am, and I do this for a living. So that's my 2 cents on that. And if you were there, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Obviously feel free to comment here and like, share, follow me on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And also, as always, guys, stay safe and stay online. Thanks.